this is a good episode. Big Ten preview, like probably a week and a half or so late.
Yeah, it's all right.
But that's okay. Because a lot can still happen because different from last year, this is going to be a full season barring any crazy COVID stuff. So
yeah,
it'll be something to look forward to. Obviously, we're going to dive deeper into Michigan and Michigan State this year too. But I want to start in the Big Ten West division. And let's start right off the bat with Illinois. They're 1-1. They just lost to Texas San Antonio last week, but they beat Nebraska in a really weird Week 1 game.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Illinois this year?
Weird team. Obviously, new head coach. They look a lot better coached overall. They look a lot more organized. Brett Bielema, I don't love him as a head coach, but he's been in the Big Ten before. He knows what it takes to win in the Big Ten. And he'll get them playing his brand of football for sure. And he'll get them organized and he'll get them to where they're not completely just beating themselves all the time. I think that was the big problem when they were under Lovie Smith is they were always beating themselves, it seemed like, and couldn't get out of their own way. It just seemed pretty disorganized, just discombobulated. And, that can happen sometimes when you've got a former pro coach coming in the college game. It's just different. So I'm not necessarily high on them. I'm probably going to be mostly down on most of the teams in the West, I'll be completely honest, just because the West is the weaker division, and I don't think there's, through a week and a half of Big Ten football, I don't think you can really say that that's changed. But I think Illinois looks better; they look more organized. But you can't go out there and lay an egg against Texas San Antonio after a big win. That's a bad loss. Like that's a really bad loss, actually. And it doesn't look good for Illinois, and it does not look good for the Big Ten. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people expected bumps in the road with Brett Bielema taking off. But like you said, he's been there before with Wisconsin. He's worked with Arkansas. So he's played with pristine teams for the most part, or coached with pristine teams. Brandon Peters obviously hurt. Art Sikowski has been a more than competent quarterback, though, to replace him. But they're gonna have their hiccups along the way. They've used 4 running backs. I think already, like, they're splitting time with Mike Epstein's been getting it the most. I think they're pretty high on their sophomore Chase Brown. But, they've got a lot of work to do.
I just think their defense is just not there. And I didn't really expect it to be. I think their offense could probably I don't think it's going to score points against the better teams, but they can probably keep them in it. Because Sikowski, he transferred from Rutgers. Like, he's had starting experience in the Big Ten, albeit poorly for the most part up to this point, but that gives you a guy that's been around. And obviously Peters, it sounds like he'll be back at some point. And he's been a competent QB for a couple different teams in the Big Ten. So it's not their offensive situation is not a disaster. It's their defense. They gave up 38 points to Texas San Antonio. You can't do that. So
I do like to see Juice Williams, at least Juice Williams Jr.
Yeah,
he's the wide receiver there, and I think he's probably their number 1 wide receiver if you look at it.
Stat wise, I'm assuming he is. He's explosive. Like, he was a quarterback last year too, if you remember.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn the light on here, but he's explosive. So that gives him a guy that is going to be a tough matchup for most teams. He's still undersized, so he's not going to scare anybody necessarily. But that's definitely a weapon that they have on offense. So I don't know. If you're Illinois fan, anything you get this year has got to be kind of gravy. At this point, you already beat Nebraska, which isn't really going to be, in my opinion, much of a feat this year. But hey, you did win your first game against a Big Ten team, so you already have a Big Ten win. If you're able to scratch a few more across, you just got to take it and run with it at this point, and hope that Bielema can kind of build a program from here. So.
Illinois is just they're a team that's like average across the board. Like, they've got their weak positions, but they're not really great at any positions, but they're just decent at almost all positions. And I think the thing with Nebraska definitely has some good pieces. Like, they've got guys that will be pros, and we'll obviously get to Nebraska at some point, but the odds are not in Illinois' favor. Rutgers wasn't even given odds to win the Big Ten, but Illinois was the lowest of odds. With plus 25,000 to win Big Ten.
Yeah, and I think the the silver lining here is that, like I kind of alluded to, the Big Ten West it's not the Big Ten East. It's not, so they have games in there that they can certainly be in and possibly win. But I just don't see it necessarily. I mean, they're still going to be outclassed by the top teams in the West still. The Iowas, probably Purdue, even probably Northwestern, Wisconsin. So that's probably, you know what I mean? Those are teams that they're probably just going to be worse than up front. And then, so the only way is that, if they're able to squeeze an upset or two, for them to have a crazy successful year. But in my opinion, if you're an Illinois fan, success is 3 or 4 wins. I mean, maybe 5. It is, you don't
5
need,
is definitely, I think if you get 5, you need to be happy for the direction that Bielema's put this team in.
Yeah, I mean, if you win 3 or 4 games, 5 would mean you stole one from somebody.
Yeah.
You weren't supposed to beat. 4 wins. I mean, here's the problem though. It's probably now dropped down because you already lost one of the games that you probably chalked up as a W before the season. So
yeah, I think 3 is kind of what I'm thinking for them. But again, it's a year where Bielema's got to try to develop his guys. Now he's taking over Lovie Smith's team, so it'll be interesting. Sure. Let's go to Iowa, and Kirk Ferentz is something 30th year, whatever there. Probably one of the longest. I think he's for sure the longest tenured Big Ten coach for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, Spencer Petras won the starting job over Alex Padilla. Mm-hmm. He's looked pretty good so far. Mm-hmm. What do you expect from Iowa this year?
I think they're going to be pretty good. Now, obviously they took Indiana to the woodshed last week, which I don't know if anybody was necessarily expecting that bad of a game, but they were at home. First game of the year, you never know. But I think their defense is going to be stout, which they showed. And I think Petras now he is a statue back there. He's not going to really wow you. He's got a big arm. He can make a lot of big time throws. And they've got arguably probably has an argument for best back in the Big Ten in Tyler Goodson. Yeah. So they have a few weapons. They always have a tight end who maybe you have no idea who he is before the season. And then you look back and you're like, oh, pretty good. He's an Iowa tight end.
I was going to say Sam Laporta this year, but
I
think they always get a superstar line. Like Tyler Linderbaum is.
Yep.
All Big Ten preseason. He's really good.
Certainly. So they have skill, and they're gonna play the way they want to play. They're not gonna, really deviate from that. So obviously, in my opinion, they're always gonna be exposed to being out athleted in certain situations, but you'll see it where they put it all together in certain games. They beat the crap out of Ohio State a few years ago. Things can happen. So I think they're going to be like any other Iowa team, but maybe just because I don't think the West is all that strong, and I'm not sold on Wisconsin either, who's been the class of the West lately, or Northwestern, who won the West last year. I'm not sold on those 2 teams right now. So I honestly, Iowa right now is my team to beat in the West. I know it's only through 1 week, or week and a half, I guess. But right now they're my team to beat. But you notice I'm not like gushing about them necessarily. That's just it's just if you threw Iowa in the East, they'd go 7-5, 6-6 maybe even. But I think they're cohesive. Like they've been doing the same thing for 30 years, like you said. So it's not like anything's changing necessarily. And I think Petras will surprise some guys, and they have a good enough running game and a good enough defense to keep them in most games. So.
Yeah, I really think 9-3 is kind of my expectation for them too. I think that's a good number to put them at. The concern is Petras, just not really there with the experience yet in the Big Ten level, but he's not going to face the most challenging of teams hanging out in the West. No. But like in the last 5 seasons, Iowa's been 41-19, but the concern there is in 1 possession games, they're 13-15.
Right.
So that's not ideal. But their defense really has no glaring weaknesses. I think their offensive line is going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. Riley Moss looks like Desmond King from like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So
you said what? They're 41-19 in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And they're 13-15
in 1 possession games.
Yeah. So what's that tell you though? They when they lose, it's not like they're getting blown out for the most part. So
it's true. Only 4 losses outside of it.
4 losses outside of a 1 possession game. So it's like they're in most games. Mm-hmm. And it is tough to play at Kinnick Stadium, like it is. Indiana figured it out pretty quickly this this weekend. We'll get to Indiana. I have my doubts there too, but it's tough to play there. So they're going to have that big home field advantage. That it's beyond Penn State at night. I think Kinnick's the best home field advantage in the Big Ten. So
yeah, those night games at Penn State, those are
Penn
rough.
State at night isn't fair. But it's a whole different category in and of itself. So let's go with 9-3 for Iowa. Yeah.
And then let's take a look over at let's go with Purdue.
Okay.
Purdue has not played a Big Ten game yet. They're the only one in the West that hasn't played a Big Ten game yet, but they did win their game 30-21. And Jeff Brom is back again. So I don't like Jack Plummer. If I had to rank in Big Ten quarterbacks, I'd probably put him possibly last.
Yeah.
Maybe second to last. But
I don't know if I put him last, but he'd be down near the bottom. He'd be bottom 3.
But I think they have the best edge rusher in the Big Ten with George Karlaftis.
Yep. So Purdue's so weird to me. Like they're clearly better under Brom, but they just can't seem to overcome, get over the top. Like obviously, they beat Ohio State a few years ago, and that was a huge
wow. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, and that was crazy and awesome. But they still weren't a very good team that year, right? Ohio State just did not play well, and Purdue kind of put it all together. They don't have Rondale Moore now. They don't have that game-breaking receiver. I think we've got a couple good backs.
David Bell's pretty good, but yeah,
David Bell's good.
Yeah.
But they don't have anybody like I think Horvath's their running back.
Andrew Horvath, yep.
And he's been okay. He's been around for a while, but he's not a game breaker, right? And then like you said, Plummer, I think he's got a pretty good arm. And this is his second year, I'm pretty sure, playing.
I pretty much think he's interchangeable with Aiden O'Connell. I think you're pretty much going to get
they're not.
results.
Yeah, they don't have a game-breaking quarterback either. So it's not like they have anything that you can point to and be like, that guy can go win him a football game, against a really good team. But when before it was like Rondale Moore could go win you a football game. You know what I mean? He could go attract so much attention and just dominate the ball to a point where it's like, man, this guy can go win us a game. They don't have that right now. And that's not to say Purdue normally has that. They really don't. I mean, on average, they don't. I mean, they had Drew Brees back in the day, and they've had some good quarterbacks. Kyle Orton, Curtis Painter. They've had guys that have had some
David Blau, yeah.
They've had guys that have been able to stick it out in the league, especially as backups. But so I think Brom's a good coach. He's creative. They're fun to watch a lot of times because they're really creative with what they do. I just don't really see it here though. I really don't. As they're going to be middle of the road. I would think 7-5 is probably a good one for them.
I'm going 5-7, so I guess you could even meet in the middle. And we could agree on 6-6.
I like 6-6. I think they're going to be able to win. I mean, you got enough non-conference games still that you should be able to win most of those. It's not like they're going out and playing Alabama. They aren't, I don't think, right now.
No, they're not. Yeah, double check that.
Let me check their schedule real quick. But I mean, if I look at their schedule, they play UConn next week, who is horrible. They do play Notre Dame
down to FCS.
Yeah, they do play Notre Dame, so they'll probably get stomped, and then they get into Big Ten play. So, and I think they have, So
before they get into Big Ten play, they're looking at 2-1.
2-1.
Yep.
So then they got to squeak 4 out. I mean,
that's going to be a confidence builder. This game against UConn. UConn, they should absolutely crush.
Yeah, UConn's bad. Randy Edsel just said he's retiring.
Oh, I didn't even hear that. That's interesting.
So,
let's equal it at 6-6 on them, and we'll obviously revisit that later. But let's go to the plus 5,000 odds and a team that I have a soft spot for, Nebraska, out of the West. They did lose to Illinois, as we already talked about. They're getting Adrian Martinez as a starting quarterback for the third year in a row, and It doesn't look like there is improvement there. So the concerns are certainly there. Scott Frost now has they've gotten some backlash. There's some stuff that came up with him already this offseason.
Yeah, he was violating practice rules and COVID violations and practicing illegally, and pretty much. So he's in hot water for sure. Just because, I mean, if the success was there and he was doing that, they would have probably just not worried about it. And just, Nebraska wouldn't have worried about it. But now Nebraska could say, oh, we could fire him with cause. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And then he doesn't get his buyout, which he's got a massive buyout, and that's really what's protecting him at this point. So, I don't know. I mean, my thing with Nebraska is like, yeah, you're right. There's just been no improvement. Like you're waiting on it. Like you gave Scott Frost a pass that first year. Like whatever, man. Like I didn't expect them to be good at all. They weren't. They got smoked by most teams. But it's like he just keeps talking about all these things. Like we need to execute this way. His press conferences are comical at this point because it's like, dude, like you can't keep saying stuff. It reminds me of like the Patricia Lyons stuff where it's like you can only say it so many times. You know, you might give them a year. You can give most coaches a year, maybe even two in certain situations if it's that bad when they get there, right? But it's like by the time you're there for that long, like you got to see improvement. You got to see improvement from a third-year starting quarterback, like you said. The man just keeps turning the ball over, and he's highly inaccurate. I mean, I know they smoked Fordham, but he completed like 50% of his passes. He was like 16 for 32 or something.
He just reminds me of their other Martinez quarterback that started for 3 years, Taylor. But there's just too much turnover.
Yep,
they're not
getting any better. They have some weapons. They have players. They have
players.
Samori
Toure is one of the better Big Ten receivers this year. I think he's leading the Big Ten in yards. Marquise Stepp and Gabe Irvin Jr. are kind of splitting carries, but they've got Sevi and Morrison and Ramir Johnson as well. And I think even one other guy that's been getting carries. So they're definitely spreading the ball in the backfield. But outside of Samori Toure, and I think the Michigan transfer, Oliver Martin.
Oliver Martin had 100 yards against Illinois.
Yeah, and I like Cam Taylor-Britt on defense, JoJo Doman, Ben Still, Feldarius Payne, Damian Daniels.
They just do some of the dumbest things, though, sometimes. It's like that first week, Cam Taylor-Britt fields the punt. Was a punt. Yeah, it was a punt, like pretty much in his own end zone or just before it, muffs it, and then runs back to grab it in his end zone and then throws the ball out of the end zone. Like, what is that?
Yeah, like, that was such a weird game to watch. Like, how much off-season rust did you have post-COVID? Like, that's what it looked like.
Apparently, you were practicing illegally. What were you practicing?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
It didn't work. So
yeah, I wish I saw more progress out of there. I don't think they have. I think their offensive line is serviceable at best. And like I said, they've got 3 or 4 supposed to be good pieces on there, but even Taylor-Britt struggled in that first game.
Yeah,
if Adrian Martinez can get it together at some point this year, they still might be able to squeak out 6-6, maybe. But I think 4-8 is kind of what they're looking at now.
Yeah, I would pick them 4-8. And they already have the one win. Let me look at their schedule real quick.
Yeah, they're 1-1. They just beat Fordham 52-7. So they lost like 31-22 to.
They should beat Buffalo, but then they got to play Oklahoma. Like they're going to get ran by Oklahoma.
Although Tulane, if they're better, if they're as good as Tulane, who knows?
They're still going to get ran by Oklahoma, and then they got to play Michigan State, Northwestern. They got to play Michigan. Minnesota, Purdue, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa. I see mostly losses there. Yeah. They could easily go
3-9 even. Yeah,
3-9. I wouldn't give them more.
I don't want to say 2-10. I feel like
I don't want to say 2-10, but I could legitimately see it though. Like I could see it on that schedule because their crossover games suck. They play Ohio State, they play Michigan, they play Michigan State. That's sink.
That's the gauntlet of the East, pretty much. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think they're in for a tough season, and if it really goes off the rails mid-year, I wouldn't be surprised if they say. See you,
Scott Frost. Yeah. Nice. Jinx. Yeah.
It sucks because it's like, hey, this is the hometown guy coming home. He obviously won them.
And he may not ever get another head coaching job again if he can't. Well, maybe in an FCS.
He'll get a chance just because I do think his offense makes sense. Like he runs a good offense. He's had massive success. He was incredible offensive coordinator at Oregon. Massive success at UCF, building it to what it is right now, where it's still having success, beyond just him after, Josh Heupel and then now Gus Malzahn. So, he'll get a shot, and I think he is a good coach. He's probably, you can't really say he's not a good coach. It's just not working. Yeah. So it's either he's not able to. The other thing is like he thinks of Nebraska, and a lot of their fans think of Nebraska as this like superpower still from the 90s. They are not.
Well, that was when they're in Big 12 country, man. It's different.
Yeah, and they are just not. Okay, they're in the Big 10 now, and nobody's going. No big time recruit is going to say, "I'm going to go to Nebraska to play."
The last time they were good was when Ndamukong Suh beat Michigan in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, they were good that next year. They had some good Big 12 years. Right?
I think they had one good Big 10 year too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had some good players, but no, they can't recruit to the level of the
Michigans and the Ohio States, and
it's not like Nebraska high school football is a hotbed. It's not like they're gonna find homegrown talent. It just isn't a thing right now. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough spot. I don't really envy Scott Frost for that position, but he's also done some dumb things himself. Said some things in press conferences that are just like, dude, what? So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I would say 4-8 is probably a good spot to put it.
Minnesota Golden Gophers. I think they're plus 2,500 odds. Over under 7 wins this year. What do you think on them?
It's tough now because Mo Ibrahim is out for the season. So they're starting best player, probably in my opinion, best running back in the Big Ten up until now. Now that he's out, I mean, he torched Ohio State. He had 160 yards before he got hurt. I don't know. With him, I'd probably put him at. Look at their schedule. They obviously already lost the one game. They play Miami of Ohio this next week, so that's a win. I think they can beat Colorado and Bowling Green. So going into the full stretch of Big Ten play, 3-1. I think they beat Purdue, so 4-1. I think they beat Nebraska, 5-1. Maryland's a toss-up. I'll put them 7-5.
Still, I mean, that's still impressive that we're going over 7 wins despite the Ibrahim loss, because I think the over-under was kind of setting them in Vegas at around 7.
Having him, yeah, I think it was at 7. I'm going to go 7-5, and I could see 8-4 actually, just because they play some bad teams. I mean, Illinois, I think they're better in Illinois.
They have an easy schedule, and you don't want to forget about, I think, easily a top 5 wide receiver in the Big Ten, Chris Hoffman-Bell.
Yeah, he's been hurt.
Tanner Morgan is a plenty competent quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he's in his 3rd year starting with them.
Yep.
So there's got to be some kind of rapport built there. I like 2 of their linemen. I think Daniel File is going to be a potential first, second round offensive tackle.
He's massive.
Lace Andrews, Connor Olson. They've got some good guys on that line too. I think it is good. And Boye Mafe. I remember when he played Michigan, he was killed it.
Well,
so
here's the thing though. The thing with Minnesota is, like, if you look at it, like, I'm not in love with a lot of these teams, like I said. So if you look at let's look at their schedule again real quick. If you look at their schedule, obviously they lost to Ohio State, right? But they should beat Miami of Ohio. They should probably beat Colorado, and they should beat Bowling Green. So that's 3-1. I think they're better than Purdue. I think they're better than Nebraska. I think Maryland is a toss-up, but they could easily beat Maryland. I think as of right now, Northwestern looks like garbage, so they could beat Northwestern. Obviously, teams change. We aren't really, I think they're better than Illinois.
Are they playing Wisconsin though?
They do the last week of the year, and I don't love Wisconsin. I mean, Graham Mertz looks like
they didn't show,
trash.
but I think Penn State's defense is really good. But
right, and all these teams are going to change. But like up until they play Iowa, I could see them legitimately being a favorite in every single one of those games, and that's already 6 wins. Then
I've got Minnesota finishing 3rd it's still in this Big Ten West.
Yeah. So here's the thing: they could be 6-1 going into Iowa, but then they could legitimately lose the next 3 games because they play Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, or Wisconsin.
Indiana could be. I think they could beat Indiana, but I don't know. I like PJ Fleck.
9-3. You know what I mean?
I'm definitely a PJ Fleck fan for sure, but
I am too. So I'm going to put it. I'm going to say 7-5, just because the loss of the running back, but I could see 8-4 very easily.
I think 9-3 was more than probable if Mo Ibrahim was fine. So
for sure,
it was interesting that preseason had it.
It is an easy schedule. It's an easy schedule. Well, I mean, the other thing, the preseason was taking into account how bad they were last year. They were not good last year. So
I don't think Trayson Potts is a scrub to kind of fill in for Ibrahim. I think he's still going to get his yards, but obviously Ibrahim still gets crucial loss.
Yep.
Next Big Ten West team, let's go to Northwestern.
Yeah. So Northwestern, I think they're going to go 6-6, maybe 7-5. They're going to be in that range.
Give me 6-6 on them.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Johnson I know he's a former 5-star recruit, transferred from Clemson. I think he's not good. They run just the most bland offense of dink and dunk football you ever see. They already lost their starting running back for the season.
Cam Porter's out, I saw. Yeah.
So he's out for the year. So that didn't help. Their defense, I think they'll end up putting up a pretty decent defense just because they usually do under Pat Fitzgerald. And, but you could see, they just got pushed around a little bit, and just the mental mistakes and just the poor offensive play, really more than anything, against Michigan State is what killed them. And then obviously Kenneth Walker went crazy, but I just don't see the explosiveness from anybody. I don't see anybody that you got to worry about on that offense. Now, Pat Fitzgerald's probably going to keep him in some games, but I just don't see anybody that you got to prepare for heavily. You know what I mean?
Yeah, defense has a few pieces. I think they kind of remind me still a little bit of like Illinois, where it's just there's a lot of just decent people on defense. There's maybe like one superstar that jumps out there, but I mean, Evan Hall's got to compensate for the loss of Cam Porter. Obviously, we want to expect bigger things from Hunter.
Even
Johnson.
Evan Hall was hurt a little bit, so
Andrew Clare is there. Andrew Clare can run the ball too. But their offensive line, you could see the struggles with the loss of like Rashawn Slater, and then I think they had another offensive lineman go in like the 4th or 5th round. So
yeah,
they lost some guys there, and pretty much just Peter Skoronski. I don't. Ryan Helinski, the transfer from Kansas, he's there if Hunter Johnson ever does decide to not be good.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's the problem with Hunter Johnson is like he's not going to sit. At least this first game, from what I can tell, he's not going to sit there and throw you interceptions left and right. But he's also going to average like 5.5 yards completion. So it's like you're not threatening the defense. You know what I mean? And if you don't, you can't do that. Like you have to have some sort of downfield threat, and they just don't have that. And they don't normally throw the ball deep all the time. Don't get me wrong, but in the past they've been able to at least get the ball downfield to some guys, and right now they can't. So I'm not very high on them. 6-6, I would say.
All right, then likely a team that's going to fight for this West Division again, as they do every year, the Wisconsin Badgers, led by Paul Christ and Graham Mertz. What do you expect from them?
I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see one more game, see how they look. I mean, who do they play next week? They'll probably play a cupcake, though. They do play Notre Dame in 2 weeks, though, so I'd like to see that. Or in 3 weeks, it looks like they would bye. They play Eastern Michigan next week, so that's
they should roll that one.
But they play Notre Dame and then Michigan back to back after that. So, I'm not big on Wisconsin this year. I think they'll probably figure out a way to
still win 10-2.
No, maybe not 10-2. I'm just gonna say 8-4, 9-3. Because I just don't. I think Iowa's a better team as of right now.
I don't think they're going to be 8-4. I
don't think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance they could. That another team
is going to be there, and I don't love their running backs this year. I mean, obviously they're gone from the Jonathan Taylor era.
The Clemson transfer Ches Malusi and pretty much Jalen Berger.
Yep, and I don't love them. I don't really. I think they'll be good. I think they're going to put up yards, obviously, in that offense, but it's not something that I'm sitting here going, these guys are game breakers. Now they're going to make plays, no doubt. They're not going to, they're going to run the ball, and they're probably going to crush some teams on the ground. We'll talk about Michigan in a little bit, but like until Michigan proves it that they can handle that type of offense, I'm probably still going to lean Wisconsin in that game. Just because they've just crushed Michigan the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But I'm not high on Graham Mertz right now. Obviously, he tore up Michigan.
He couldn't get the ball to Danny Davis. The best he could do was I think Jake Ferguson, their tight end, averaged like 5.6 yards.
He was one of the top or bottom 3 lowest ranked QBs per PFF in the entire country last week. Now, obviously, he's playing a good team.
Yeah, Penn State's defense looked legit.
That's part of it. Penn State's defense is probably good. I know they should be. They have athletes all over the place. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's going to go out there and win you a game. And then it's just funny because they let Jack Cohn get out of there, and then he just tore it up for Notre Dame the other night. Yeah. Different offenses, different guys, but still, it's just funny.
Although Brian Kelly's going to have that team executed.
Yep. So you're right. Jack Cohn died.
By electric chair.
Yep. Executed.
And Brian Kelly got canceled. So, yeah, I think there's going to be 3 teams that are going to be fighting for that spot. I think we kind of, unanimously said, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin are in that conversation at the very least. And I don't see any other team in that division that I don't think anyone else has a chance.
No, I really don't.
So I think with that, we can go to probably our favorite division, Big Ten East. And let's just get this one out of the way. Ohio State Buckeyes.
I mean, they're the class of the conference. It's not really an argument. The one thing I will say is like that defense is still probably going to get – that defense has not been fixed. I mean, they weren't good last year. The offense is going to win them most of their games. The defense, they just give up a lot of yards and they give up a lot of points. I mean, they just do. They're not fundamentally sound. They don't. But what the idea is like, hey, let's try to outscore these teams, and that's they're kind of playing some they're not Big 12 level defense. Don't get me wrong, but because they have the pass rush, they have athletes out there, but that defense is not great. It's not going to be elite by any means, in my opinion. Now, the only other caveat I would say is I don't think it really is going to matter as much, but C.J. Stroud is not Justin Fields, and he's not necessarily like – he obviously put up some big numbers, but their average length of touchdown the other day was like 57 yards. So, like, the big plays are extremely important to them for them to have success. And if you can just keep the ball in front of you, I think you can probably find some success there because I'm not sure if C.J. Stroud's at the point where he can be surgical and just pick you apart all day. He's
I don't even know if they're a playoff team, to be honest. This is the worst team I think I've seen in a while. And granted, it's still early, so there's a lot to see. But I think anytime you get a new quarterback, he looks the part of an Ohio State quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but
and I think he's good. Here's the thing: I think he's good, and I think he's definitely in the top 5 in my opinion of Big Ten QBs already. But a big portion of that is just his weapons.
The wide receivers are nuts. Olave and Wilson. Rutgers, a great tight end.
By far the best receivers.
Master Teague and Mayan Williams.
And then I mean probably Travion Henderson's probably the better back of all of them. He's just so. The weapons around him are crazy. He's gonna
have good edge rushers again this year with Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith.
Yeah,
I think Tyler Friday gets
their offensive line is going to crush some teams. That might be the strength of their team, in fact. So other than the receiver group, that's probably the strength of their team.
Led by Thayer Munford. He's probably a first-round guard.
Yep. So I don't really see too many teams. I mean, I think Minnesota gave them a good game, and that's obviously week 1, so you never really know. Their schedule, they play Oregon this week. Oregon looked really bad, though. And they are at home. Ohio State is. So I think that'll give them a test just because Oregon can probably, keep up with them athletically. But it sounds like Kayvon Thibodeau might be out. So that's going to really hurt Oregon. So I'm definitely picking Ohio State in that game still, although I don't know if it'll be a blowout. But then they play Tulsa and Akron. Those are both wins.
I think we can ensure 11 wins from them at the very least. I don't think they're losing.
Oregon, so even if we said Oregon's a toss-up, just because it is a top 15 game, right? So then that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They play Penn State. That's a tough one, but that's still a win in my opinion. 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9. What? Are we missing a game?
So their worst case is pretty much 9-3.
That's worst case.
Yeah.
That's like they're burning.
The wheels fall off.
Things would have to go really wrong for that to happen.
That's them having to use Jack Miller III as a quarterback. I don't know.
Right, or Quinn Ewers fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, I'm saying that's the worst. That's if they lose to Oregon, if they lose to Penn State and they lose to Michigan or something. You know what I mean? That's what would have to happen, and I don't really see that happening. So,
I mean, Penn State could give them a run. That defense just looked so good, and like you said, their safety is Jaquan Brisker. I mean, we can move right over to Penn State now. Jaquan Brisker and the corners of like Tariq Castro Fields. I like their linebacker Ellis Brooks, Adisa Isaac, and Brandon Smith. They've got really strong pieces. Jesse Luketa. And PJ Mustipher in the middle. I like that defense a lot. Yeah. And then getting, obviously, Journey Brown's gone now, but Noah Kane, John Lovett, Sean Clifford's been their starter now going into his 3rd year, I believe.
Yeah.
Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, Like, and they have one of the best tackles in the Big Ten with Rasheed Walker. So there's a lot of really good pieces in this Penn State team. I don't want to just jump out and say, but I think this is a team that, if their defense holds up again, could steal that game from Ohio State.
Yeah, I love their defense. I don't love their offense. I don't know where they're going with it. You know what I mean? Like what do they want to be? Like they got some weapons. Clifford isn't outstanding by any means, but obviously he's been there. I just don't know what
he actually looked better 2 years ago. I feel like Clifford looked like a better quarterback.
Definitely. I mean, he might have had a better team around him or whatever. They had some better backs probably, but Noah Cain's still there. He's a good back. I just don't know what they want to be on offense, but if they rely on their defense, it's going to keep them in most games. So I would say 9-3 for them. They're going to have some tough games though. I mean, if you look at they just beat Wisconsin. They played Ball State. That's not going to be a tough game. I don't know how Auburn is at all this year, but they do play Auburn in non-conference, so that might be interesting.
Still an SEC team, yeah.
That's probably a good litmus test, honestly. Obviously, the Wisconsin game was too, but different type of offense playing against. So that would be a good one to watch or pay attention to. Then they play Villanova, which that's not going to be close. But then Indiana, they have Iowa as a crossover. That's not easy. And then they play Ohio State mid-year, and then they play. I'm pretty sure they play.
Is that Iowa game a night game? I mean, they probably haven't decided that yet.
Still TBD.
Yeah.
They play Michigan later in the year at home, but because it's so late, it can't be a night game. So Michigan lucks out there. It won't be the whiteout night game. I don't think. I think it's because it's so late in the year they're not allowed to.
Okay.
So, because they close with Michigan, Rutgers, Michigan State. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting. A lot depends. Again, a lot depends on how good Michigan and Michigan State, and we'll get into them shortly here, but how good Michigan and Michigan State actually are.
Yeah.
Because I think that changes the complexion of the Big Ten in general. If they're both good, or even if one of them is really good, that's going to change, because that changes how Penn State is. That changes a lot of that. So,
what about Maryland? Talia Tagovailoa is doing quite well for himself. The Tagovailoa to Dante Demas has been a nice little tandem.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland's they got two really good receivers, Raheem Jarrett and Dante Demas. And then Tagovailoa, I think he's good. He's coming along, especially. I don't know what to think about them though, because we've seen this before so many times with Mike Locksley. I think he's won only like 6 games in his entire head coaching career at multiple different spots. So not that good. And we've seen this before out of him. Good offensive coach, doesn't know what he's doing on defense. And they've been a team before that's, they beat Texas a few years ago where it's like, man, they've upset Texas when they had Sam Ehlinger, and like it was kind of like a crazy game. And it's like, oh my gosh, Maryland. And then they went out and like laid an egg and lost to like UTEP or something stupid. So,
they have the worst defense, I think. As I was going through all these teams' rosters, I felt like Maryland's defense, if I had to like rank 1 to 14, they might be worse than like Rutgers even.
Yeah, they are worse than Rutgers. They might be worse than Rutgers in general. Here's the thing. Like, I think they have a better quarterback, and I think they have better weapons on offense, but overall, top to bottom, they might be worse than Rutgers, because there's not and the thing is, I think Maryland and Rutgers have both gotten better to a point where like they are an improved product out on the field. So they're not the Rutgers of, 2 or 3 years ago where it's like Michigan's going to run through them 78-0. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I don't think either team's great yet. And I don't know if they're ever going to really get there. It's tough in that division. So I'm going to still say 5-7.
Okay. I'm actually saying 4-8 for them.
Okay.
I really like Tagovailoa. I just if that defense isn't stopping a whole lot. Yeah, no. I think that's going to be the biggest concern. They're going to have to win a Big 12 football game. That's what's going to have to look like every week.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if they're really at that point. Like, Tagovailoa is good, and like obviously the name recognition.
I think he's going to have some scrub games though.
But yeah, he's not Tua. Tua's better.
Yeah,
Tua's way better. In fact, you know what I mean. Like, he's good, and he's got ability, but he's not. I'm not even sure he's a pro prospect. I mean, obviously he's still young, but down the road even, I'm not even so sure. So I think. And they have weapons. So, like I said, they could put up some points, but I just don't – the defense isn't going to stop anybody. And I'm not sold on Mike Locksley coaching at all. So, not a fan of his, actually. So
let's go to the other bottom feeder there, which it may be Indiana, but I'm going to say Rutgers.
Okay.
just the two noobs still in the Big Ten. But Shiano has been a great coach. We saw actual improvement from Rutgers last year. Noah Vidral actually is probably a midline quarterback in the Big Ten.
Possibly. I'm still putting him down in my bottom 4 probably if we rank them, but I
still feel like that's the highest a Rutgers quarterback has ever been.
Yeah, they're certainly better than they have been past. I mean,
Isaiah Pacheco though is a solid running back. Really Bo Melton, Aaron Cruikshank. Like they've got pieces there that I really like. Avery Young is one of the best corners in the Big Ten. Ola Fadikowski and Tyshawn Fogg at linebacker.
Yep.
Even Drew Singleton at linebacker. They've got really good pieces, and I feel like even if Johnny Langan had to come in and play quarterback, they're not dead yet.
No, I don't think they are.
That defense is the best defense I think I've seen in a while, and I think that's what we talked about. What puts them over the top from Maryland, even in my opinion.
Yeah, they could actually stop somebody. That would be the thing. Obviously, like I don't think they're not there yet. But Shiano had that thing rocking when he left initially. Now, obviously, it was in the old Big East. It's not the same. So I don't know if he's ever going to find that same level of success. But I'm going to put them at 5-7 actually as well.
I like them above Maryland, so 5-7 seems like good.
And but I do think they are better than Maryland. And they're still a bottom feeder. They're not going to beat the best teams. But they're just better. Like you can just see by watching them, they are a better team. Like they're well
for sure.
Yeah, it's not like they're out there just like playing just the complete terrible brand of football. Like they're in some games.
They're looking like a well-oiled machine sometimes.
Yeah, they beat Michigan State last year. Not saying that was worth anything last year. It wasn't, but that Michigan State team turned around and beat Michigan the next week. Not saying that beating Michigan was anything last year either, but it's they have some ability there, and I do like Pacheco a lot. So
I just think there's so much anomaly yet still with this Big Ten, especially the Big Ten East. I think we can kind of like look at the top 3 in the Big Ten West for sure, but like the Big Ten East, again, we don't know what we're going to really expect out of Michigan yet this year. We expected way more last year, and they won like 3 games, and then Michigan State beat Michigan and then they lose to Rutgers, like super inconsistent team. And I feel like Michigan State's on par to be that same inconsistent team. But I want to get to Indiana before we do our final Michigan teams here. Michael Penix Jr. obviously coming back from an injury. I like Ty Freifogel a lot and Miles Marshall at wide receiver. But they don't have Stevie Scott anymore at running back. Tim Baldwin will try to fill that spot. And I don't like the defense that much. Peyton Hendershot's pretty good tight end.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some concerns on defense outside of like Micah McFadden and Tywan Mullen.
They have weapons on offense, and like I know people talk up Penix like he's amazing. I really am not sold on him. I'm not. Like he's had some weapons, and but he first of all, he's never been able to stay healthy, so that's his first problem, right? His second problem is he's not actually all that accurate. I mean, he throws
he's a try-hard, though. I give him that. He's a try-hard. Like he's aggressive in what I say that. And,
he's got a big arm.
Yeah, and even he's a try-hard in the fact that he probably runs more than even a mobile quarterback should. Yep. Like he tries to make a play every single play, so you have to give that to him. That's kind of what I mean by that.
I just don't think he has enough weapons around him, and I think the thing with Indiana is they were the kind of team that was so like senior laden last year and like heavily veteran that they could survive like a COVID year, right? Where it's like, hey, we all know what we're doing. They were on the same page. Like they didn't need the extra practice and things like that. When you have a team like that, like you can probably survive getting, not having as much practice all the time and, all the ups and downs of the COVID stuff. And Tom Allen's just been there for a long time. So it's not like they were trying to break in a new coach or anything last year either. And, and he's built a good culture there. He's built a good
program. They should be a consistent bowl team at the very least.
Correct. However, I know Indiana fans were like going into this year thinking, man, we could challenge for the East. I'm like, no, like they caught lightning in a bottle last year and it really worked out for them. But everything had to go right for them last year. Like they really shouldn't have beaten Penn State, and Penn State was horrendous last year, right? Penn State lost their first 5 games, but they shouldn't have beaten Penn State. They beat them by like that much of an inch of a football hitting the on a reviewed play that was it's still remotely questionable, whether he actually scored or not. So, they just had a lot of close games. Like, obviously they beat Michigan decently handily. Probably, I think they beat them by like 15, 16 points, 18 points, something like that. But, those are the games that I think they're going to be in a lot of those games. Obviously they got destroyed by Iowa last weekend. So maybe not. But I think everything really had to go right for them to have the kind of season they had last year. And I don't think that's going to happen again.
Their offensive line's not going to hold up. Caleb Jones, and then like I think their second best offensive lineman is a backup guard that was a Michigan transfer, Zach Carpenter.
Yeah.
So that's concerning, for sure, especially for Michael Penix coming off the ACL injury. So
I just don't, they're not talented enough for things not to break their way. They were like top.
They might steal one game again off luck.
They were like top 10 in the country last year in turnover ratio, right? And turnovers, in my opinion, but they've never been like that all the time in Tom Allen's career. Like they've always been decent, but like never been that good, right? Mm-hmm. Turnovers are inherently random. A lot of it is random. Like, hey, one team fumbles all the time, but they always get their fumble back. Yet the other team fumbles all the time and, can't get it back, right? That's random in a sense, right? The ball bounced a certain way for one team and it didn't for another team. And I think when you see teams that are as outliers, they're going to regress down to the mean a little bit. So I would say I'm going to pick them 6-6 or 7-5. I don't like their team right now. I mean, they're going to get better probably if they can keep Penix healthy. But even he's not – I mean, everybody was stacking him up as like the best quarterback in the Big Ten before this season. I don't think he is.
So I think they're worse. I still like Penix. I think if he had a better offensive line, I think better things could happen for him. Sure. I feel like he just has to do too much on his own. But like I think Michigan State's better than them, and I will get to Michigan State here. I think Michigan State will be 6-6, so I think Indiana's going to go 5-7. And they also might match both 6-6. But Michigan State, let's dig in a little deeper on a team like Michigan State this year. Obviously, an anomaly. Even last year, winning games they shouldn't have, losing games they shouldn't have. Yeah. They have a running back that looks as legit as they had since Javon Ringer and Le'Veon Bell. And I think there's some good things here with Kenneth Walker, the fourth. Mm-hmm. And Elijah Collins is a backup. Peyton Thorpe got the nod over Temple transfer Anthony Russo. Yeah. But I think, again, there's Jalen Naylor and Jaden Reed, two solid wide receivers.
Yeah, they have some playmakers. So that's the thing. Like they've got some guys that actually, if you sit there, you actually have to circle them if you're a defensive coordinator. Obviously Walker had the massive game. He's good. He's legitimately good. Now, I have my questions about the goodness of Northwestern's defense, the speed of that defense, certainly. But at the same time, like they went out there and did exactly what they needed to do in order to kind of make a statement there. On the road for a state game at night. That's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. I don't think Peyton Thorne's going to go out there and win them a game. I don't think they're really going to ask him to. He's going to be real similar to what, Cade McNamara is going to, we'll talk about him for Michigan. Like just, hey, don't lose us a game. You know what I mean? Don't go out there and get us beat because you're turning the ball over. You're making poor decisions. I think he's got some physical talent. He can move around a little bit. He's got a pretty decent arm, and he obviously has some weapons with, Walker in the backfield. Reed can fly. He's probably their best receiver. Naylor's right there. He had some flashes last year. So this is a team. They're going to be stout up front on defense. They always are. They plug the middle. They got some transfers at linebacker. Quavaris Crouch from Tennessee. He's certainly an athlete and he can run. Didn't love his game the other night just because he's kind of out of control and doesn't know exactly what he's doing yet, but he's going to get better. They've got some guys there now who can certainly play the way that Mel Tucker wants to play. So they're going to be tough. I need to see some consistency out of them before I'm sitting there going, okay, they're going to be really, really good, but I'm actually going to put them at 7-5.
Okay.
Right now, because I look at it, they play Youngstown State this week. That's a win. But then they play Miami of Florida, which I mean they got absolutely steamrolled by Alabama. But
I think Miami's better than that,
Miami
but I
is
think
probably better than
that
Michigan
game will
State.
be competitive.
Yep. So I think Miami's better than Michigan State. But here's the thing: if Michigan State, obviously, as long as they don't lay a complete egg against Youngstown State, they're going to be feeling pretty good going into Miami. And then it's going to be like one of those things where it's like, hey, something special could happen here, where we could go out there and surprise everybody. I think it's a noon game, but still, like, we're gonna go out there and surprise some people here, and we could maybe steal one from Miami. And then they play Nebraska. That's a win.
Western Kentucky's a win.
Western Kentucky's a win.
Rutgers probably a win. You would think it's at Rutgers, but
right. So, like, I mean, they could certainly. I would say they're probably going to lose to Miami, and then they could go into that Indiana game with one loss. I could see it. Now, I could also see them going into that Indiana game with 2 losses. They could lose to Nebraska. I think
7 losses is their worst case scenario, like wheels fall off sort of deal.
Yep. And here's the thing: a lot of Michigan State people, now their expectations have been raised because they beat Northwestern. Because that was a toss up to me before the year because I didn't really know what to think about either team. But now that
they handled them pretty well.
Now they handled them the way they handled them, I know a lot of expectations have raised. But really, they go into that Indiana game with 1 loss. That's a toss up, and then they play Michigan. Obviously, it's in the big house, so it's going to change some things. And we'll talk about Michigan. We'll see where they're at that point.
Is that game at the big house? I thought that game was East Lansing.
I'm pretty sure it's at the big house this year. I can check.
I'm looking at the schedule right now. It doesn't say at Michigan.
It says Michigan versus Michigan State. Maybe it is at State. It is at State. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at Michigan State, but still.
Again, that is either way. I think that's a toss-up game every year. That's turned into the rivalry that Michigan Ohio State should have been.
Yeah. You got Purdue, Maryland 2 wins, and they play Ohio State and Penn State. So the last 2 weeks are tough. But they could. I mean, I don't know. I need to see consistency because, like you said last year, they would go 1 week where they look really good and beat a team maybe they weren't supposed to, or at least hang with a team they weren't supposed to, and then they lost to Illinois last year. Like,
I think their ceiling is 9-3 and their floor is 5-7. You meet in the middle at 7-5. That's not a bad pick.
No, and if they go 7-5, they're going to be happy.
I would be. I mean, Mel Tucker's putting that team back in the right trajectory again. So right. I don't know. Again, we like that their offensive line pieces. I think they've got 4 returning starters with Matt Allen, Kevin Jarvis.
I still think the offensive line to me is their worst position group.
Really? Allen and Jarvis and Duplain seem really good. But
Duplain looks good at times. I just don't think Allen to me is just like meh. He's obviously been around, so he's not going to screw things up necessarily, but I think it's still their worst position group, but they're going to be helped out by
thing. Like Brian Allen was there. I think Brian, who's the other Allen? Brian, right?
You said
Brian, Matt. I feel like there's one other Allen.
Yeah.
But either way, I feel like they've always been centers there.
Yeah, and I think they're going to look better because they have a better back now. I mean, Walker's got some quickness that their other backs just don't have, including Elijah Collins just doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. And then if the problem is going to be, in my opinion, they're probably going to struggle to protect Thorne when Thorne's got to go out there and beat a team with his arm or like really make big time throws. Yeah. And that's where they're going to struggle, in my opinion. He didn't have to do that at all against Northwestern.
Northwestern is not really known for their pass rush. I feel like they've got a good safety and a good linebacker, and that's pretty much it. So I think with Michigan State, they've got a good pass rush with Beasley and Panasuk.
Yeah, I think their defensive line is going to be stout. I mean,
Jacob Slade in the middle. Yep,
they just are stout. The question is, are they decent in their back 7? And I think their back 7 will get better because they have athletes there. So defense, I think, is going to be good. Their offense, I think, is going to be better. I just don't know if Thorne's the guy that's going to, put you over the top necessarily. And their offensive line, I think, is just going to struggle. So against the better teams.
Yeah. So let's go to our favorite team, obviously Michigan.
Yeah.
What do we expect from them this year? They are a plus 2,500 odds to win the Big Ten, which I think is like 5th or 6th in all the Big Ten. The over-under set for them is actually 7.5. And I think they're a team just like Michigan State. You just don't really know what you're going to get from them this year. They crushed Western. They looked really good against Western. But I don't think Western's a team where you're like, that's like you said, a good litmus test. I don't think that's a great litmus test.
No, I mean, what you take from the Western game is, hey, they played a good quarterback. I think Caleb Ellaby is a good quarterback. So I don't think you can throw away everything that you saw in that game. And they finally, they did what they were supposed to do, which they did not do one time last year, other than maybe Minnesota, but whatever.
If they beat Washington, they're 4-0 going into the Wisconsin game, I think. I feel like you can beat Rutgers at home and NIU at home.
Yeah. And Washington just lost to FCS Montana. So you need to beat Washington or it's going to be an embarrassment in all actuality.
It's pretty much like losing to Michigan State after Michigan State lost to Rutgers.
Exactly.
It's going to be except worse.
It's the exact same thing as last year, second game of the year. So here's what I did like. They have more of an identity this year. They know what they want to be. They're going to be a team that's going to run the football. They'll take their shots when they're there, and that's what they're going to be. And I'm fine with that. Like, their best players are the running backs, if you really think about it, especially with Ronnie Bell out now.
Yeah. Now what? Yeah. I was going to say Bell was in that conversation, but
their best.
Tom Haskins and Blake Corum. Harbaugh said today that's the lightning and thunder that they want.
Yeah, and they should. I mean, I think Blake Corum is their best player. I would put that right now. I think he is their best offensive player right now. And Hassan Haskins is probably close behind. So if you're a quarterback on that team, it's like, look, I just got to find a way to get these guys the ball as much as possible. Like, if I can do that, I'll be fine.
Even Donovan Edwards is a third running back. I liked watching him
those
in that time.
Running backs, boom, 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 right there. Like, I will take those three guys all day long.
It's just going to be seen. Now you're going to have to see guys like Cornelius Johnson and Mike Sainristil and Roman Wilson and Dalen Baldwin all step up in the shot. And I don't think those are ideal shot receivers. Like Ronnie Bell felt like that guy that you could take that shot with. Sure. And the other guys have speed. AJ Hennings got speed too. I didn't mention him. Yep. They've got plenty of speed now because Ronnie Bell was already not their burner.
Nope. He was their best receiver though. So it's a loss. Now, what's going to happen? So, I mean, the defense, I think, is just going to be – it was kind of a breath of air to not see just people getting torched in man coverage left and right, see some change up, see an NFL-style defense where it's like, hey, we're going to keep the ball in front of us. We might bend a little bit, but we're not going to break. Like, yeah, we might give up some yards here and there. We might give up like 7-yard completions, come rally and tackle. Hey, we're not going to give up the 65-yard touchdown. We're not going to give up we're not going to get pass interference left and right because we're always in man coverage. That was a breath of fresh air to see the other day. And as you can see, like they kept changing things up. They kept disguising coverage. They kept doing things to confuse a good quarterback, a legitimately good quarterback, in my opinion, in Ellaby, who's, I think he'll get a chance in the league. And that right there, what that told me is like, hey, they're going to maybe be in this defense. I think is going to be better than some teams thought they'd be.
I think they've got like 4 considerably dominant players. I think when you go to, Hutch, Daxton Hill, Brad Hawkins, and Josh Ross, I think, and then you get solid players like Gray and Jeter and Hinton and Barrett. Yep. They've got pieces there that you can feel comfortable with.
I mean, it's a different defense this year too. I mean, they're playing more 3-4. I mean, they're based.
A lot of Nikai Hill-Green.
Yeah, they're base nickel now. So obviously, unless they're not going to be base nickel against like Wisconsin, maybe not Minnesota either, depending on what they're doing. But so Dax Hill's going to be in the nickel, your nickel guy, and then you're going to play 2 down linemen. Technically, you're going to have your outside linebackers standing up. Like Hutchinson basically is an outside linebacker in a 3-4, right? So he's standing up along with David Ojabo, and then you've got just speed all over the field at that point too, with your linebackers and your safeties, and you're able to do a lot more, in my opinion, with that type of defense. And you're not asking your defensive linemen to be pass rushers. Then you're not asking, the defensive tackles like Chris Hinton and Mozzie Smith. Those guys, they just got to eat blocks. You know what I mean? Just hold their ground, eat blocks. They don't, and they don't need to be the guys that are making tackles in the backfield. That's just rely on your defense, your Hutchinsons, your Ojabos, your linebackers to do that. Just eat blocks. And I think that to me, that's what this team can be. Like ideally is like, look, I'm not expecting superstar play out of the defensive tackles because everybody's like, oh my gosh, the defensive tackles stink. Like they're not nearly. Yeah, I mean, they're not asked to do what Maurice Hurst was asked to do. You know what I mean? Or
Rashawn Gary
when he kicked down to D tackle. Like they're not really asked to do that. And it's just a different defense. And it's just honestly, it was refreshing to see. I mean, it was different.
Hutchinson, I think, was one of the highest graded PFF edge rushers.
Highest. He was the highest.
Yeah.
And then Cade McNamara was actually the highest graded quarterback.
And it's interesting because he didn't do anything.
I mean, he's 11 of 13, and the 2 incompletions were batted down.
He didn't put his team in a position to fail. That's why, I mean, we saw J.J. McCarthy make a ridiculous throw, and people were crowning him as the next GOAT. But, like, the people were like, start McCarthy. And, McNamara did nothing to lose his job.
Well, he did nothing to lose his job. And here's the thing. This team, and we talked about it on Saturday, this team is not in a position to start a young guy who's going to inevitably make mistakes and like bring him along. And they're not in position to where like this defense can always be put in a bad position once or twice a game because McCarthy's going to throw a couple picks, right, on ill-advised decisions. They're not that good of a defense. So
like that throw technically was almost an ill-advised decision.
Yeah, I mean,
most quarterbacks are not throwing across their body like that.
No, and you don't necessarily want him to not make the throw because if he can make the throw, great, good for him, right? But you can see like he's got that gambler in him, which is cool. Like you want that, and it's amazing that he's able to make that play. But it's like, okay, he's also probably going to make some big time mistakes, right? And if this team is not that kind of team that they can just work through that. They don't have the kind of dominant defense to where they can handle that. And to me, McNamara is the kind of guy that's just going to move the team. He's going to move the offense. He's not going to make the big mistake. He can't make that throw. I know he can't make that throw. He's not going to be able to make that throw, but they're not going to ask him to make that throw. I mean, they're not even really asking JJ to make that throw, right?
Yeah.
But what he's going to do is he's going to be accurate. He's going to run the offense, and he's their leader. The team respects him. He's been there. And to me, until McCarthy makes it impossible to not start him, you can't not start McNamara, or until McNamara shows that he is mistake prone. You know what I mean? And then at that point, then you got to play the guy with higher upside.
Yeah, McNamara could turn out to be like, I mean, Brandon Peters, when he first got his couple of starts, people were like, wow, Brandon Peters is sweet. And then he had those games in a row where he was just pretty much butt cheeks. And then they gave the next guy in line. So looking at the schedule here, I think worst case, I feel like you got to be disappointed if you're worse than 7-5. 7-5 seems plenty feasible.
It's worst case, yeah.
And I think best case though, I think best case is 9-3. So if I'm going to put a record, I'm going to put it right in the middle and go 8-4. Yeah,
I would say 8-4. I said 8-4 before the year. So obviously, I think you got to put Washington as a win now, and that was a toss-up before the year.
Yeah.
So, but now I think you need to beat that team, just because I think you are a better team based off of obviously week 1 to week 2 things change a lot, but then you're going to beat Northern Illinois. You should beat Rutgers, and then the Wisconsin game is a question mark for me, right? Yep. Not because I'm high on Wisconsin. It's just like Michigan just has not handled them well the last 2 seasons.
Especially not in Wisconsin.
No. So let's put that as an L for now, I guess. But that could change. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I'm going to put it as an L for now. They should be.
I feel like you got to get Cornhuskers. Yeah.
Yep. I would say before this season, I thought Northwestern was a toss-up. Now I think they're better.
Okay.
So you go into that with 1 loss. You go into Michigan State with 1 loss. That could be 2 1-loss teams right there. Yeah. Honestly, the way we talked about it.
This is where the schedule could deviate. The records could deviate quite a bit because you're right. I think
because if you go
Michigan State,
because that's 6 wins, right? 6-1.
3, 6. That's 7, and we go 7. We'd be 6-1. Yep.
Going into Michigan State. Okay. So from here on out, this is your season, right? Unless you beat Wisconsin, right?
Hey, you start to walk the gauntlet there.
So you could literally, they could legitimately lose 4 out of the last 5. I could see it. They could win. I think the most feasible one is they win 2 out of the last 5, or they go 2.
You'd like to think they could beat Indiana and Maryland.
Yeah, I mean the way Indiana looks now, but Indiana beat them last year.
But it's a home game. Hopefully, hopefully that helps a little bit.
It is a home game. Yeah.
The Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin look like the L's for me right now.
Yep. And before the year, I would have said I think
Maybe even Washington. I actually thought they might have lost Washington.
Yep, and I would have flipped Michigan State to more of a lean win, and I still am leaning win there, but it's a toss up now to me.
Especially now that it's in East Lansing. No, like that's tough to win in East. I think the last time we beat them though was East Lansing. So
Harbaugh's actually got a better record at East Lansing than he does against.
I was going to say I feel like it's never really been a hassle for us.
No, they've actually. I don't think he's ever lost there. Actually, I'm thinking about it. I mean, he's had some bad teams. State has, but still. But yeah, so I'd say 8-4, 9-3. I'd pick 8-4 though. You know.
So yeah, best case 9-0 into the showdown with Penn State.
That would be the best case. Incredible, but we haven't seen enough from this team yet. But here's the thing: it's not like they're going to be out athleted or like just completely should be out. You know. They're not going to face a team up until Penn State that they don't have better athletes than.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in all actuality, they are not. So, you know, Washington obviously it is a tough game just because it is. It's just how it is. But they are not going to face a team that they have worse athletes than until Penn State, and then at that point, Penn State. It's close. I would probably lean Penn State, but it's close. If they go 9-0 into Penn State, I mean, you never know at that point.
That's
I mean, at that point, you got like Harbaugh's feeling good about the extension. Like everybody's feeling pretty good then.
Yeah, and the only way this gets worse is if they somehow lose. I mean, somehow lose to Washington, like it's a scrub team, but they lost to a scrub team. So yeah. There's that. They lose that game. You lose to Wisconsin, Madison. You lose to Nebraska and Lincoln, and maybe Nebraska finally gets it together. Then you lose again to Michigan State and East Lansing, Penn State obliterated by Ohio State. That's the worst case scenario, and then you're looking at a 5-7 season.
Yeah, and that's like off the rails. Harbaugh fired.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh's fired if that's the case.
Now, if they go 8-4, I think he's fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think 7-5 technically. They didn't sit there.
Even 7-5, I would say just because of how.
If you're 6 or less, I feel like that's where they can make that call pretty easily.
Right. Yeah. Unless one of those wins is Ohio State, it's game over.
Yeah.
So, to me, if he's 8-4, he didn't lose. There was no loss to a team you shouldn't have beat. You know what I mean? Or you shouldn't have lost to. So you can't really sit there and be like, oh, well, what the heck is this? You know what I mean? It's like. You should beat. Here's the thing, though. He needs to beat Michigan State. I mean, in all actuality, he does. I think
that season could really. I mean, thankfully it's later in the season, but that season could go south real fast.
I mean, it's as it always is. It seems as soon as you get to end of October into November, it's getting pretty tough there.
Yeah.
Depending on what happens. So
okay.
I don't know. Well, be interesting, but I think they're I don't know, it could be a really fun season, but if they go out there and lay an egg against Washington, we'll talk about it and it'll be horrible and I'll be angry and I'll go jump in the ocean and feed myself to the sharks or something.
Well, we'll be at an ocean real soon, so make a plan ahead.
Yeah.